Hello, I'm Alex Mozed, and you're here on Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. I'm joined by Nick Johnson, co-author with me on the book Modern Monopolies.
Hello.
And what we're going to talk about is this morning, bright and early, I think 6:20 a.m., I joined Maria Bartiromo on her show on Fox Business, and we spoke about Amazon, and we spoke about Facebook. We're going to come back to the Amazon stuff in a second as we look at their earnings. Actually, the earnings call is going on right now with Bezos and team. But I'm going to show a little highlight clip about what we spoke about with Facebook, and then we'll come back to the Amazon stuff after that.
What kind of regulation changes might you expect?
Net, I am very positive on Zuckerberg, and especially the stance that he's taking. I don't think Congress gives the American people enough respect or credit for their ability to think for themselves. I think, on the Libra topic, it's going to be a positive thing for America to innovate. You look at what Congress is beating Zuckerberg up on. It's actually kind of anti-American, right? It's saying, well, we don't want you to innovate, particularly when your product will be used abroad, which will only help America's influence abroad, A. B, we want you to regulate more aggressively, basically free speech on your platform called Facebook. It just doesn't really resonate with, I think, our value system and what we stand for.
Okay. So, what I was talking about there is basically what Zuckerberg, I think, testified yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday, and about Libra. And there are two caveats to what I was talking about there, which I'm going to get to. But one of the things Zuckerberg mentioned is that there's 1 billion people underbanked or underserved by the current just financial infrastructure globally. And what I was talking about there is that where do we think those 1 billion people exist? Maybe somewhere in the United States, sure. But
it's not your average Bank of America user. It's people in developing markets and emerging markets where there isn't a lot of infrastructure. You have people that don't have bank accounts, or you have there's a lot of people that might have a bank account but never use it and don't really know.
Yeah, they just
how and
they can't get access to the modern day just financial ecosystem. Right. And that's kind of what that underbanked term refers to. And what I go on to talk about is, China understands this very well. China understands soft power via their tech monopolies. They are masters at wielding this and supporting their tech monopolies abroad so that selfishly they can impose what they want when the time comes. And we're seeing that play out with Tencent, the NBA, which we've spoken about many times on the show. What this is getting at, though, is to say if we are limiting Facebook from innovating, which seems bizarre, are we actually handicapping our own U.S. tech companies to really have influence? Some influence, sure, in the U.S., sure, but more so abroad. And why would we want to do that? Now, if Congress wanted to actually be productive, and look, when I say Congress doesn't actually give enough the American people the respect they deserve, that basically, I didn't want to say this on Fox. Basically, I think that Congress thinks the average American is stupid and that these people need to be shielded from all of these horrible bad actors called tech companies, and that the American people can't make these decisions on their own. Where else have we seen this? We saw this when we were talking about giving Americans the ability to have their health records go into Apple Health, and all of the flack that was created to prevent that from happening, because Americans don't understand what happens when they give their health record to Apple Health. So you kind of see this script playing itself out again and again. Well, here's the irony. The joke is actually on Congress. I think Congress is actually the stupid one that doesn't understand what they should be actually talking about. If this wanted to be a productive interview or hearing with Zuckerberg, the two things I would drill in on would be, why is Libra founded and based in Switzerland? That should be based in the United States, and drilling him on that. That would be point number one, right?
Because they have the best regulatory regime he could shop around for is really the real answer.
Well, exactly. So, right, if you're saying, hey, we want to be innovative, we want to support our tech companies, we want America to be stronger because we are the United States Congress, right? And we say, okay, maybe I should get behind this Libra thing because probably China will do this. If
China is looking at doing cryptocurrencies, their central bank has been exploring this for at least a couple of years.
Exactly. So then you say, okay, hey, maybe we should do this, but how can we make sure that this is done in the right way, which is what these hearings are supposed to be about? And then you say, okay, maybe Libra, because Code Libra is the operating entity, which is based in the US, but the actual Libra cryptocurrency entity is as currently designed based in Switzerland.
The Libra organization, basically the consortium of companies that make up that, it's based in Switzerland.
Why shouldn't that be based in the US? That'd be number one. Number two would be this basket that Zuckerberg and Libra is saying we're going to create a basket of real world hard currencies to help back the crypto. And what they've said is that that's going to be a mixture of a variety of different currencies. And then again, being selfish US congressperson.
Well, didn't he make explicitly the argument that they should be backing this because it's going to basically be an expansion of the US dollar and help establish that as a, continue that as a reserve currency because it'd be mostly US dollar. I think he said that, didn't he?
He may have, but I would, but it should be all US dollars. So you should really be driving home that point home more aggressively and focusing on that stuff. As I think he made it as a subtle point. You're right. But I don't know. It just seems everyone focuses on the wrong thing. Everyone just wants to beat up on Zuckerberg. I'd say in the moral hierarchy of tech monopolies, the hierarchy can go up or down. But right now, I'd say Zuckerberg is actually pretty high in the moral hierarchy of U.S. tech companies when it comes to their decisions to not go into places like China because
he tried.
He tried to go, but then they said you got to put your servers
I think
here.
You're giving him a little too much credit. He learned Mandarin for several years very aggressively, and it wasn't because he just thought it would be fun.
He wanted to go into China, but he didn't end up going into China. There's a line, and it was, well, I'm not going to give China my data. I'm sure there's other things involved in that.
I think it's probably more I didn't want China to steal my IP. And
yes,
give it to somebody
exactly.
else,
I didn't want China to steal my IP. But, I would say, again, on the hierarchy of morals, actually, he can speak for having done that much more so than other U.S. tech companies like Google and Apple and a few other folks that we've been talking about on the show. So, not saying Zuckerberg is perfect, but I don't think he's getting a fair rap on this currently, and people are focusing on the wrong things. So going back to Amazon. So what I was talking about on the show for Amazon is that, net Amazon, I'm the most bullish of all the tech monopolies that are out there, US tech monopolies. I'm the most bullish on Amazon. They are down 5% or so after releasing their earnings at the close of business today. And basically, they beat on revenue. They missed on earnings because of all the stuff they're investing in with like one-day shipping and all of these kinds of things. The thing that really has hit them is that their guidance for Q4 revenue was below the street's expectation. And what I was talking about on the show with Naria is that these tech monopolies basically are just valued and their stock is going up or down based upon growth.
Right.
This isn't a how much money in earnings did you squeeze out this quarter. The fact that they missed on earnings, that's not the reason the stock is down. The reason the stock is down is because the growth wasn't as aggressive as what Wall Street thought it was going to be for Q4, the big holiday shopping season. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you look at their guidance, it says Amazon gave fourth quarter revenue guidance in the range of $80 to $86.5 billion, which is, below what the street thought was $87.4 billion.
Right.
My suspicion is I think Amazon might try to make GMV a bigger part of their reporting. Because I think if we look at their numbers from Bezos' annual shareholder letter from April of this year, you now see that third-party sales are 58% of the overall throughput of stuff being bought on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at this revenue number,
and that number's probably only going to increase. That's what it's been doing.
And it's only
for the
going
last
up
10 years.
So again, and we've talked about this many times, revenue does not do platforms justice, particularly any kind of marketplace,
right?
Where really the true measure of growth, if you're valuing a platform business for growth, how do you just look at revenue rather than GMV? And I still can't understand that. But, to give Amazon a hard time, they haven't been very transparent on what their GMV is. This was actually the first time they released that information in an official way.
Well, I think part of the reason they don't is because it makes it easier to say what Amazon's market share actually is.
Yes, for regulatory, that's a good point.
So I think that there might be some hesitation for them to do that regularly, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If it becomes transparent that, Amazon actually has 50% of retail or whatever it is because their GMV is X and they report it every quarter, that could be a problem for them. So we'll see. Now,
the interesting thing, so that actually puts them in a pickle. And the pickle is to say, hey, if we were evaluating GMV expectations, they might actually beat or surpass what they think they'll do in GMV and total throughput on Amazon in Q4. But what they're calculating is how much of the GMV is going to equate into revenue. And to just spell this out, if I have traditional revenue, e-commerce revenue, I buy a product, I source it, I buy it, I put it on my balance sheet, and then I resell it. If that product's $100, I recognize $100 worth of revenue.
Gross sales and revenue are the same thing for traditional linear first party, whatever you want to call it, e-commerce. Not true for marketplace.
Right. So now what GMV is saying, well, if a third party seller on Amazon lists a product to sell for $100, that $100 is not considered revenue. Say $15 of that is considered revenue, which
whatever you basically keep after as fees charged to the seller is considered revenue. Seller. So there's GMV and revenue kind of measure two different things for platforms, whereas obviously if linear retailer, they're one and the same. GMV is really like, okay, what is the power of your network and ecosystem? What is the throughput? How strong is that ecosystem performing? Is it growing? Revenue is really about your unit economics. How much of that throughput that you're putting through can you actually capture? It goes to the bottom line. Because at the end of the day, I should say, GMV doesn't feed the monkey. You got to make You got to try to make some revenue so you can be profitable. But just looking at them, one or the other isn't going to give you a full picture of what's going on. As we've talked about with Lyft, for example, revenue is increasing and they're doing that, but they're not reporting GMV, and that's a little fishy because it probably means what they're really doing is amping up, rates and charging users more than they used to, not actually growing the company. So that they're basically squeezing more juice out of the lemon, but it's still the same lemon or maybe even smaller than it was 6 months ago. So to really get an accurate picture of the state and health of the marketplace business or a platform business, you need both that GMV and that revenue number, and you need to be able to compare them and understand. Just if you have one, you're really never going to get the full picture.
And so for 2018, Amazon's GMV was $277 billion. 2018. Right now, they're growing at 20 to 35% per quarter. Okay, so you can see here it's somewhat hard to kind of see on this graph, but basically it's saying like, hey, in 2018 they had between maybe around $55 billion for each quarter for the first 3 quarters, and then you have a jump up to about $70 billion in Q4, so holiday season of 2018. You roll that all together, call it $225 billion, roughly. So you can kind of see, and that also includes probably at least $35 billion-ish, maybe $30 billion of revenue from AWS. And they obviously have other revenue coming in from their other initiatives as well. So that's saying you have less than $200 billion in e-commerce marketplace revenue. But they had $277 billion in GMV. It's a wide gap, and it's not all being recognized. So anyway, again, and then as Nick mentioned, there are regulatory concerns about how much they should disclose that. So interesting pickle for them to
I think
navigate.
part of the problem here is there aren't standard accounting rules about what you have to report for a marketplace. Like if
Yes,
you literally
for
look at the
platforms,
actual accounting regulations, it's really there's a difference between basically if you're acting as a principal or an agent, and that basically are you what first party and you control everything, or are you just an intermediary? But it's not. There's no really standard reporting saying you have to report GMV and you have to report revenue. Obviously, you have to report some kind of revenue, but a lot of these companies don't report GMV, as with Lyft. I would push for, as these companies become more and more and more important, there should be standard reporting rules. If you're a platform business and you are public and have a market cap or revenue of X, you need to report GMV.
Yep. So let's keep moving. Microsoft beat earnings and revenue expectations yesterday. They're up a few percent as a result of that. Their Azure product slowed in growth, but it makes sense. It's a maturing industry.
Right.
When we looked at our 4-quadrant analysis of Amazon, AWS is definitely in the monopoly stage at this point, and there's roughly 20% a quarter growth, which is great. AWS, I think, is doing about $9 billion in revenue, so that's a considerable amount of growth on a quarter-over-quarter basis. Azure being number 2. One of the points I made on the show with Maria was that actually, if you look at the 1, 2, and 3 rankings in cloud storage, Amazon 1, Azure 2, Google Cloud 3, it actually directly maps to the number of apps in their app marketplace, in the AWS app marketplace, Azure app marketplace. The number of apps directly correlates with the ranking, the amount of, just how popular each cloud storage
which makes sense.
is.
The more people use it, the more app developers want to be there. The more app developers there are, the more stuff you can do with it, and people will tend to use it more. So there's definitely a relationship there of some kind.
Absolutely. So I was at a lunch with Bob Iger today, Disney CEO. Really interesting. He just came out with a new book. And, he's talking about Disney Plus, which is going to launch November 11th and November 12th. I'm going to get it $7. And I'm a big Star Wars guy, and, the other stuff. I like the Marvel stuff too. Basically, what he was saying is that there's room for multiple players in the streaming wars. And I would agree with that.
The same way there's room for multiple TV channels. It's the same business model. You just have a different distribution mechanism.
Yep. Exactly.
So it makes sense there'll be more than one streaming service.
And so basically, there's rumors here that South Park, if you watch the show, thanks Chris and Dirk for some of the comments on LinkedIn. And as Chris and Dirk know, and others who watch us know, we like South Park a lot. And so South Park, it looks like there's rumors that there's a $500 million deal for the streaming rights for South Park. So that means that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the 2 creators of South Park, would bring home $250 million split between the 2 of them. Not a bad payday. Viacom owns the other half, and then they split the other half between the 2 of them. But as Nick and I were talking about, you can go stream South Park shows right now. I think like southparkcc.com or something.
It's been online. With ads, obviously, sometimes with some restrictions on when it's available and for how long, for years. I think it actually started out as a third-party site that basically was illegally streaming South Park, and then they just kind of took it over and licensed it properly.
Here, let's put ads.
But it's also, I think at some point there was stuff on Hulu, which made sense when Viacom was involved in that. Not sure if it's still there, but with all the money being thrown around, it makes sense that Viacom certainly would want to get a piece of that pie with one of their more valuable properties. Yeah,
it doesn't seem like Viacom's really entering the streaming wars themselves, and maybe they'll just focus on creating content and selling it off.
Bob Bakish said that the economics of that look terrible, and he doesn't want to get involved.
I think so.
They're a content company, and this isn't our core competency. Right. And we'll be on the ones that make the most sense for us. Basically, who's going to give us the most money, but. We're not going to go bleed billions of dollars to try to be Netflix, which
I like that play.
Does make a lot of sense.
Now, how would something like South Park get paid for? Oh, maybe the $2.2 billion in junk bonds that Netflix is selling. which I like the title of this article. Netflix sells these junk bonds as it braces for onslaught of competition. Apple Plus, I think, comes out
like November 2nd?
November 1st. I think November 1st,
Okay.
November 2nd.
I know they timed it deliberately right before Disney.
Yep, exactly. So who wins? The consumer wins. The content creators win. Netflix is still going to be a fine company, but they're not going to be as grand as they were when it was just them and no one else, basically.
Well, I think the problem if I'm Netflix is their U.S. business is pretty mature, and it's not a lot of their growth is coming internationally.
Yep.
They've been struggling with domestic growth,
700,000
before these things launch, which are going to be for the first time like serious domestic competition.
Yep.
And by the way, the domestic subscriber numbers, that's where they make most of the money. They're not charging $15 or whatever a month in India or Brazil or other emerging markets. No one would use it. So if I'm, basically I'm being attacked in my core market while I'm still trying to bleed money internationally, it's going to be tough. Tough couple years for Netflix ahead, I think.
Yes, agreed. So last topic is we actually saw two apparel company CEOs step down, I think literally within a day of each other.
Yeah.
CEO of Nike, Mark Parker, and the founder and CEO of Under Armour as well. And the interesting thing about Under Armour is they had dabbled in platform stuff. They'd made some acquisitions of like running apps,
right?
Pseudo platforms,
trying to create kind of like social network type platforms around
share like running routes and
around basically athletic activities of various kinds, where you have these really engaged communities, and they wanted to move beyond like just you buy a product from us to like it's really part of your experience and lifestyle, and then they could embed deeply in that and obviously sell you products as part of that.
I don't really know how that's done. It was an interesting play. I was very supportive of the play, and just because I want to see these traditional enterprises try these things. I think they had like a $300 million acquisition.
There were some big acquisitions.
Nike tried with, the Fuel Band.
Right.
Not really a platform play there. I saw
they had the
clear
Fuel Plus or whatever it was community. They tried to build around that.
Right. I don't know if that ever really got going.
I think that never got the kind of momentum behind it that you'd want, especially after the Fuel Band basically disappeared.
Exactly. So now here's what's interesting. Why do we talk about this stuff on a platform show when they're not platform companies? Oh, here's why. This guy, John Donahoe, the new now incoming CEO to Nike, is the former CEO of eBay.
Right.
And they're saying there's a big emphasis on selling online. Now, here's the interesting thing. I mean, I think these guys have focused, and by these guys, I mean Nike and Under Armour, these apparel companies have focused on pseudo platform things in the kind of fitness community arena, right? Like the workout, let's connect you and, share tips or I don't know, peer pressure and enthusiasm to work out, right? Okay. It's not super sticky. I don't think either of them really had a slam dunk win there. Where I see a very big platform play in apparel is in the product marketplace for shoes and apparel,
right?
Which we have seen now with StockX, which we have seen now with GOAT, and a few others, Stadium Goods, and probably one other one that I'm forgetting about. And Foot Locker put $100 million into GOAT, and this is a very big space. If I am John and I'm coming into this and I was running eBay, I think this is a very interesting choice. And I think Nike needs to make some big decisions about should it own its own marketplace.
Right.
My answer would be yes. They should own their own marketplace. I don't think they like playing second fiddle to Amazon, where they now are selling products through Amazon. They didn't want to sell. They have a huge retail presence.
There, basically, by the gray market on Amazon, and Amazon gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. Basically, said, "Okay, we'll help you deal with the gray market, but you have to come sell on Amazon." So they're basically there because they got bribed to be there. They're not there because we love selling on Amazon.
And here's the other thing to me is, I think Nike and Adidas and the Yeezys and these things, they've done a good job of locking up these celebrities that then they do these collaborations on, and it's working. I just wonder how long that model continues to work, and especially with the presence of a marketplace like a StockX or a GOAT. And if you kind of play this thing out a few years down the road, you say, how hard is it to actually make a sneaker?
Especially in limited quantities.
Especially in limited quantities.
Yeah, special edition kinds of things. And I think what you're hinting at is you might start to see like smaller shoe companies or more niche kind of designers pop up doing these collaborations. And then if I'm the celebrity, I don't need to give away, I don't know, 70% of the revenue or profits or whatever the economics are. It'd be a lot better if I do it with someone who's smaller than if I do it with Nike.
Let's say Dan Bilzerian or Dave Portnoy want to do their own shoe, and they're like, you know what, doing this on my own or whatever, and it's not that hard to just cut Nike out. And if you already have a following of millions of people, you say, well, do I need to do? Well, maybe Nike doesn't even want to do it with you because they're like, hey, Dan, you're associated with, marijuana and all these things. Like, we don't want to touch that, right? Like, we don't want to be and Dan's like, well, I want a sneaker.
Right.
Okay, I'm guaranteed Dan's going to find a way to cut Nike out. And he has distribution on the marketplaces, and Dan could create probably a limited edition, sneaker that sells to his fans. Hypothetical example. Don't kill me over the example. But the point is, if you're an influencer and you have a following, how much do you really need the shoe manufacturer?
No,
if you have the distribution of a marketplace.
Nike isn't necessarily a manufacturer; they're a product designer and marketer and brand. The manufacturing is stuff they contract out. So, like, if you can get access to the manufacturing resources, if I'm, a huge influencer, do I need the designer and Nike brand, or can I? Unbundle that basically, and then use my own brand to go do this.
Use my own brand, or
and then
just
the marketplace
some of
offers the distribution,
or it could be a second tier sneaker brand.
Right.
Or
it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they're seeing that the distribution channel is getting away from them,
right?
Where it used to be controlled. It used to be basically Foot Lockers, which they have specific contracts with. Then they said, we've got to go direct. We've got to own our own retail stores. Nike and Under Armour have both done this. Then I don't think they like playing second fiddle to Amazon. They've got a monopoly on shoes. Like,
they've also been news that they're looking at potentially cutting out some basically smaller resellers and distributors online and saying, let's go put everything, it seems like, on Nike.com.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be a mistake. Just given we think about marketplaces, you're going to seed a lot of customers that aren't going to come to Nike.com, and you're not going to be playing in the places where your customers are. You certainly will have some people that will just go to Nike.com because they want Nike stuff, but you're going to be losing, I think, long term in a big way if you just try to go linear seller versus all the marketplaces out there, whether that's Amazon, whether that's GOAT or StockX. You're not going to win that battle.
Yeah.
And even if you're Nike, I think that's not a winning.
Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting place. So we'll, of course, keep you posted. And thank you for joining us on Winner Take All. We will talk to you tomorrow.